A special 1-hour presentation, AccuWeather Ready, the 2020 hurricane season during COVID-19.
This will be probably a more active season than normal.
Hurricane season is upon us, and it's time to get ready now.
An expert panel of government leaders and meteorologists address the concerns.
Adjustments are going to need to be made through a COVID-19 lens.
What is being done to keep you prepared and safe during a pandemic?
The major message is there, we're going to do what we have to do to save lives.
Hello, I'm AccuWeather Meteorologist Brittany Boyer, and I'd like to welcome you to our special program, AccuWeather Ready, the 2020 hurricane season during COVID-19. We are pleased to be joined by an esteemed panel of government leaders as well as representatives from the meteorological community. They include the following: Ken Graham, the director of the National Hurricane Center; John Bennett, chief of staff for the city of Tampa, Florida; Bill Wheeler, the Harris County, Texas Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator. Harris County includes the Houston area. Lucas McDonald is Walmart's Director of Emergency Operations. Trevor Riggin is the Senior Vice President of Disaster Services at the American Red Cross. And from AccuWeather, we have Jonathan Porter. John is Vice President of AccuWeather for Business, and he's also a meteorologist. And then we have Dan Kottlowski, AccuWeather's Senior Meteorologist and Hurricane Expert. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate you joining us today and helping our audience learn more about what to expect during the hurricane season ahead and how all of this relates to the concerns around COVID-19. At this point, there seems to be consensus that this year will be yet another active hurricane season. Dan Kottlowski is AccuWeather's Senior Meteorologist and Hurricane Expert. Dan, could you start us off here with some insight on what people can expect for this hurricane season?
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. It's beginning to look like, looking at all the climate factors that are going into the season, that this will be probably a more active season than normal. Again, how active, again, is kind of hard to say. Current indications are right now we could have as many as maybe 14 to 20 storms, tropical storms of those. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 11 could be hurricanes, and of those 7 to 11 hurricanes, there might be as many as maybe 4 to 6 that could be major hurricanes. Again, all depends on several factors. One of the big factors that we have going right now is the fact that water temperatures across much of the Atlantic basin, especially where tropical cyclones develop, is very, very warm, and that's projected to be warm by our climate models.
The coronavirus is affecting almost every aspect of our daily life, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that from each of you. But as I mentioned, I want to get back into Ken here, and we know that the National Hurricane Center is usually on the Hurricane Awareness Tour, ensuring that the key points are brought up to the general public and also the media and government officials, as well as emergency management officials. What are those key points that you want to hit home for this year?
First of all, I just wanted to thank you all for doing this. I mean, just to be able to put this panel together and talk about preparedness is one of the big aspects of what we have to do. We have to adjust and do it virtually, and I think we're doing that, so that's a good thing. So planning early, I think that's the big thing. We have been working hard behind the scenes to be able to put together some new items. One of them is looking at storm surge. It's the leading cause of fatalities in tropical systems, and causing half of those fatalities. 90% of fatalities actually is the water. So we have a new product. It's a new graphic just for you all to use, everyone to use. It's an easy look, an experimental look at what the maximum storm surge could be at any given location. And I wanted to bring up one other, Brittany, is there's a new dot on the forecast map. It's a 60-hour point, and it doesn't seem like too big of a deal, but it really is. It gives us at 60 hours, it's another point that we can see the size of the storm, the forecast strength of the storm. It's another way that we can look at how to calculate the storm surge with that information. So we are going forward. The biggest thing is let's prepare early.
Those are some really important improvements, and it shows how multifaceted a storm situation can be. And it's also important to recognize factors like wind speed, rain, and also storm surge, as Ken was just talking about. John, how do you take those elements into account and how they affect our everyday lives?
That's something that we've been really focused on here at AccuWeather over the last couple of years, is how do we most effectively communicate all the different types of risks and impacts that a hurricane can have in an area. Sometimes people say, oh, I'm just going to be concerned about the wind, but that's a big mistake. As Ken and Dan both mentioned, Hurricanes often bring many, many different risks, and a lot of them increasingly are water risks, both at the coast in terms of storm surge, but also well inland, all the way up into parts of the interior where hurricanes can produce copious amounts of flooding rainfall that can cost lives and cause big property damage. So here at AccuWeather, we released last year AccuWeather's Real Impact Scale for Hurricanes, which is a new innovative way to communicate about the risk level and takes into account a variety of different potential impacts well beyond just the wind. So we're talking about what's the impact from inland flooding, what's the impact from coastal storm surge, which causes many, many fatalities and a lot of property damage, and also total economic impact and loss. And so we bring those factors together into a scale that's a 1 to 5 scale, and we added also a less than 1 characterization as well. So we can use that as a really helpful tool to communicate the total impact.
And I love the points John made. I mean, it is all about the impacts. It's about trying to share those. When you close your eyes and think about a hurricane, what do you see? And generally the answer we get back is the wind. And in reality, when you look at the data, it's the water that's causing the issues. This whole part of this whole Weather Ready Nation initiative that we have, it's talking about impacts, always impacts. And that could be well inland. It's, hurricanes, it's not just a coastal thing. You can have a lot of impacts inland. And actually, if you look at since 2017, most of the fatalities that we've had in the continental United States has been inland flooding from rain.
COVID-19 is affecting everyone, especially in our busier cities. Bill Wheeler is the Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator for Harris County, Texas. Houston, one of the nation's largest cities, we've all heard of Houston, is no stranger to storms.
You have to remember we're still only eight months away from Imelda, so we're still in recovery. We still have a huge heavy lift on even Harvey recovery at this point. But right now everybody's getting all of our planning ready. And you have to remember that hurricane planning, when you introduce COVID-19 into it, every piece has to be gone through to make sure that you're able to maintain those things that are recommended by our health providers on social distancing, face coverings. But, I guess the major message is we're going to do what we have to do to save lives.
And at this point, are you encouraging your residents to do anything in Harris County with the hurricane season right at our doorstep?
We had a tough time with Imelda. The storm was so slow to pick up speed. It was so slow to get here. I call those sleepers. My team knows what that means. You have to be prepared till it's gone. And Imelda peeked around the curtains at the very last minute. Got named a system, and then it came in, and we got hammered pretty well. So we have to make sure that we prepare all of our citizens for all those things.
We want to head from Texas into Florida now. Tampa is the 3rd largest city in Florida, and their Chief of Staff, John Bennett, has been patiently standing by. John, thank you so much for your time today. Your city, thankfully, has been spared from pretty big hits in recent years. However, you still have to prepare and make sure everyone is aware of the plan. What's the game plan for your city?
Well, first, as you mentioned, we're no stranger to preparedness. Being an urbanized county in Hillsborough with the city of Tampa nested in it with about 1/3 of the population of 1.4 million people. And of course, we're nestled against another urbanized county, Pinellas County, to our west, with another 1 million folks in an MSA of over 3 million. And we consider ourselves a peninsula on a peninsula. So we have a ton of waterline risk. As we mentioned, water is one of the greatest threats. And of course, as we're all dealing with COVID, you have to look at your resiliency and start adapting even further. And we're looking at increasing our shelter capacity through adding shelters, because as we know, social distancing will be something we're going to have to deal with going through the summer.
Each of the cities have not only residents, but also important businesses that are open, offering essential food and supplies to the areas. And with us, we have Lucas McDonald. Lucas is Walmart's Director of Emergency Operations. Lucas, from a business perspective, how are you thinking differently this season with COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, the world is very different, but the mission is still the same. You know, we take care of our associates, our operations at the communities that we work in. And so I think as we've gone through the last few months, we've seen the customers and the members figure out new ways to shop and figure out what works best for them. Sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's through our online piece. But the good news is those things that people need to prepare, that can be done either way, whether you're in the store or doing it online, from not just Walmart, from retailers really across the country.
We work with over half the Fortune 500 firms and thousands of other companies. They're all doing their part to take a look at what are those action plans. How might my typical hurricane response be different this year than in other years? Now, Brittany, you asked about hospitals, and we've been working on a special program donating our site-specific weather warning services to hospitals all around the country. In fact, over 500 of those facilities using our service, and we know that they're also dealing with some very specific challenges.
Ken, hearing from everyone and their concerns and how they plan to kind of navigate through the hurricane season this year, obviously communication is key right now. We want to make sure that the public is getting out important, factual information from the right people. Do you feel like there's a confident approach to a strong communication plan so everyone in affected areas knows what to do?
It's so important with that communication plan that everybody understands that you're not always going to get that lead time, and stress your plans. Everybody watching this, it's so critical. There's so many exercises, or you practice your family plan. It's real comfortable to work that plan in 5 to 7 days if you have that amount of time. These storms get strong quick. In the continental United States, there's only been 4 Category 5 landfalls that we have on record. And it's really interesting. You look back at, back in the 1930s, there was one. You look at Camille in 1969, or Andrew in 1992, and you look at Michael. Every single one of those was a tropical storm 3 days before that Cat 5 landfall. That's how fast things can happen.
And Dan, I know you always talk about how all it takes is one storm. Can you just talk about that and reiterate the fact of having a plan and how important it really is?
It all boils down to the fact that anywhere along the coast, anywhere, even Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, anywhere in the Caribbean, and even Hawaii, you've got to have a hurricane plan. And again, what's interesting about this year is a lot of people have had to buy supplies to deal with the COVID-19 virus. And a lot of the supplies that you have are already stuff that you prepare for or have in place when you're dealing with a hurricane. However, there's other things like batteries that you did not have to use this, for the virus, and also the sanitary supplies that you have to buy. The wipes and also the whatever you need to keep yourself clean, whatever you're going to use to wash your hands with. But the plan has got to be in place. This is a good time to have that checklist, write everything down that you need to do that will prepare you for the worst.
We're still pretty early on getting into the season, but as Dan reiterated, it only takes one storm. Last year, you guys were impacted by Imelda, Harvey a couple of years ago. I'm sure that acted as a learning experience for a lot of people down there.
Oh, it really did. We had just many folks that have been impacted since 2016. We've had 5 different floods right before Harvey. So we talk about flooding all the time. We're already out there in the media communicating the message about preparedness. And we have also tapped into that COVID-19 virus preparedness message. You've already done this much. It just takes just a little bit more to get prepared for hurricane season. And this presentation here is going to certainly help all communities to get better prepared for hurricane season.
I know the Red Cross has already been helping with shelters this year from flooding victims and also those that have been impacted by tornadoes this year. You've had to make some changes in the way people will be sheltering. Can you tell us what you've been doing so far, what has worked, and what you continue to do going forward?
Absolutely, and thanks, Brittany, for having us on. And it's a great forum to really share messaging about preparedness and what we can do to keep our community safe. We have been using different methods to shelter people these past few months, including hotels. In fact, since April 16th, just in the last 4 weeks, we've provided more than 23,000 hotel stays because of the tornadoes across the country. It's a very different model for us, but we believe it provides a much safer alternative for families, provides the safe social distancing measures. We have volunteers on the ground providing concierge level service in those hotels, making sure people have access to face coverings and the food, working with the hotels to make sure they're staying safe as well. But we do know that hotels won't be the answer in every storm. And in fact, in hurricane season, we assume that we will have to open shelters, and as Bill said, mini shelters, in order to keep families safe. And so we've introduced new protocol. We've adjusted a screening process to make sure we're taking the temperature of clients that come to shelters, checking for symptoms. If they are symptomatic or have a fever, moving them quickly into an isolation area that has healthcare staff on hand. We want to make sure they know that our shelters, and whether we put them in a hotel or in a shelter, that they're the safest they can possibly be, even in the face of this pandemic.
Obviously, the pandemic changes people's mindset about the social distancing and the need to shelter at home. And of course, depending on when your home was built and what mitigation efforts you've taken over the years, based on your home. And, we have a lot of mobile homes in the area still. There's thousands of mobile homes across the Tampa Bay area that, regardless of what the threat level is, will most likely need to evacuate. But I think the second thing, which will be more interesting to find out over time, is that our seasonal residents that typically come down from the Northeast or other areas that may have been heavily impacted by the pandemic may not go home like they normally do and take up residence longer in Florida, and therefore we might increase our evacuation pool. And not only that, it might be our elderly population and the less experienced population around evacuations.
We're always concerned about that. We've had two issues: one, not enough evacuation, and sometimes too many. We haven't had a wind hurricane here in a long time. I think it's been 37 years since our last real wind event. It's going to be hard to communicate that preparedness message and the evacuation message. So we probably have 40-50% of the community that's new to hurricanes. So our communication has to be basic, and it has to be thorough, and we have to make sure that message gets to our entire population, because we have about 156 languages here, so all these things are very important.
We've seen in the past that tropical storms can intensify quickly, and the public hears a tropical storm differently than they do a hurricane, as some of our guests have been kind of alluding to here. They may not feel the need to evacuate. We've seen storms intensify significantly as they near land. Ken, you know this very well, as much as I do and our guests do. Do you think people will write off evacuating this year, given the COVID-19 pandemic that's on our hands?
I think everybody has to realize. I mean, we've heard today, the conversation's been amazing today, and listening to it, there may be some adjustments in those plans, but the bottom line is those basic risks of a hurricane still exist. I mean, whether it's a tropical storm that produces 40 or 50 inches of rain, could be incredibly dangerous for communities. It's not about that category. It's about the size of the storm. It's about the speed of the storms. I always joke about this, but it's the best way to get the point across. There's no such thing as just a Cat 1 or just a tropical storm. And, there's a little control that we have over those names, and we'll make sure there's never a Hurricane Justa. And that's, we jest about that a little bit, only to drive the point across. Not about the category. Everybody has to listen. You've heard it over and over from everybody today. It's about those impacts.
You're definitely right about that. And John, we're hearing about things from a community standpoint and emergency management standpoint, but how do businesses come into play here when it comes to evacuations that might be underway or just a landfalling hurricane that might impact their business?
Many companies take this type of planning very seriously in terms of looking at, here's the decisions I need to make 4 days before a potential landfall, 3 days before a potential landfall, and that's involving questions of how am I going to keep my facilities protected? Most importantly, how am I going to keep my employees safe? When do I need to shut down operations in a particular area? And if you're a company that's involved in terms of helping communities make preparations and respond to natural disasters, which many are, think about folks like Lucas and his team at Walmart, for example, other large retailers, utility companies, insurance companies. These are all organizations that while they're in the private sector, are also very heavily involved in helping communities prepare, respond, and then recover from natural disasters. And we know that they're all taking a look at all those different action points that they need and figuring out when they're going to, what kind of adjustments are going to need to be made through a COVID-19 lens.
Yeah, just like everybody else, we're watching every wave, every special outlook that the National Hurricane Center puts out, every forecast model, trying to get ahead of not only the hurricane or tropical storm. We are very close to all the products that the National Hurricane Center puts out. We have the hurricane refresh, the F5 on the keyboard every day as we're getting close to the time that the new advisory comes out. I want to go back to Hurricane Justa or Tropical Storm Justa because you have you have the everybody preparing, you have the hurricane, and then what you have is when it's just a tropical storm, it's been downgraded to just a tropical storm, and it's sitting inland 100, 150 miles, and it's producing winds of 60 miles per hour. For safety reasons, all of our transportation is shut down. We don't move our trucks unless winds are below 40 miles per hour. So the sun might be shining on the coast already, but the goods and the supplies that people are going to want for that recovery are still held up in a truck for safety reasons. And that just goes back to the importance of having things ready now. That way you don't need them right before or right after that storm.
Having things now is definitely a perfect example of what we should all be doing at this point. Trevor, can you shed a little bit more light on that message from the American Red Cross? What should people be doing right now to prepare, and what kind of kits should they have at this point?
This year has an added layer of complexity that we just haven't experienced in recent times. And so if you think of the more than 20 million people that are now without work, that adds a layer of complexity on, can I afford to evacuate? Do I have the resources to evacuate? And then for everyone, every single person in the country is impacted in a way where they've had to use their emergency supplies in some way. The supplies they have at home, the stockpile they have in their pantry or their cabinet, they've been using as they've been sheltered in place. And now's the time to replenish any supplies you may have used during this difficult time: water, soap, any supplies you can have related to COVID-19 to make sure your family is kept safe during this time.
Is it business as usual at the National Hurricane Center this year with COVID-19? I know for me and my colleagues, we're social distancing, we're doing our part to flatten the curve. Is anything different this year at the National Hurricane Center? Are people working remotely? How exactly is the workflow this year?
Yeah, we are taking the steps to keep ourselves safe like everybody, and the discussion about having that plan and thinking about things early, that's exactly what we are doing. We're encouraging everyone to talk to their families. I've talked to my own family and having our plan, because it's hard to be here at work when I'm worried about my own family. But here at the center, we're taking steps to have that social distancing. I mean, think about this. We're thinking about hallways being one way. We've moved some of our workstations to be further apart from each other. We're talking about those type of things, using masks coming into the building and walking around the building. So if you think about it, I mean, we're needed in any hurricane season, and in this season we're also just as needed as the rest. So we want to be healthy. We want to make sure the employees are safe. That's number one.
Hurricane Ike in 2008 hit the Houston area hard. Huge surge of 20 feet or so battered the shore. Ken, why is surge something so important to watch?
Yeah, historically, the leading cause of fatalities. And that's why we've taken the steps over the last 10 years to separate the surge out of the Saffir-Simpson scale, because that's the scale's about the wind. So the surge is the leading cause of fatalities. So we have the storm surge watch, we have the storm surge warning, just a dangerous aspect of this hurricane, the impact. You know, if you can move a hurricane 30 or 40 miles in either direction, and that can make the difference of a 2-foot of storm surge or 10-foot of storm surge at any given location. So it's really important to understand that we have to look at those, listen to the local officials, know your zone, get out of those areas where the storm surge poses a threat.
Storm surge to us is so important because some 60 hours before these storms make landfall in our region, we have to make sure that those people that need to evacuate that are impacted by a 3.5 to 4 foot tide, storm tide, we can get those people out, that's one of the major hazards that we had during Ike, is we couldn't get those people out because the storm surge came in 2 days ahead of time. We got storm surge on Thursday. We didn't get a storm until Friday night, so we were behind the 8 ball on that because of the rapid storm surge way before tropical storm force winds ever got here.
I appreciate all the information today to give the community and government officials those decision support models and information so we can have the right, not only the right size evacuation for storm surge to lower the risk of those fatalities and injuries, but to plan well and to manage our clearance times. In our area, we're very restrained by transportation opportunities, especially when one county's got to evacuate in and through other counties. We have a lot of density, and therefore the only way we can manage that is being more surgical with our analysis and our communication.
What message do you want to get across to people this year despite COVID-19? How important it really is to get out when you're told to get out of your community?
Every single hurricane, when I go out there and walk in the damage and meet people and talk to people, within miles of each other, I'll meet somebody that says, that was so much worse than I expected, I'm never staying again. And then I'll meet somebody else that says, well, you know what, that wasn't that bad, I'm never leaving again. It's all about perception.
Ken, as we've often seen with COVID-19, social media can be informational, and at the same time, it can be scary. In fact, sometimes information comes from bad sources. So there is a wrong or misleading information out there. Do you worry about wrong information, getting out onto social media that isn't true and therefore can cause a public reaction that is not necessary?
So I think everybody has to realize that, make sure you got a source that you trust. I mean, we're all in this together. We work with you all so much over there, and the media, with meteorologists, both in the media and also talking to the emergency managers constantly. So we're trying to put those messages together, but it's just be careful. Basically, based on personality type, somebody that is actually, more on the side of being worried will find that one line that reaches them at any given period, and it's very stressful. Another that actually will always be the positive side will ignore that line and find the one line that doesn't go there. Be careful doing that. It's stressful enough. Make sure that you have a good source of information.
Lucas, Walmart closed about 30 stores across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama during Hurricane Michael. What do you do first? Keep your employees safe, and second, get back up and running, since affected communities, of course, we're all as consumers waiting for supplies.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll throw in Hurricane Irma, where we closed over 450 facilities just to be safe whenever that hurricane was making landfall. I think a big part of it is working with our local community leaders. So there are times where evacuation orders are issued, and the community leaders want us to go ahead and close our stores so people can get out, and we kind of create a funnel of people leaving the coast. There are other times where the community leaders ask us to stay open so that those that are there responding are able to go ahead and get what they need ahead of that landfall. So we'll work very closely with community leaders in each situation and in each individual community. And then same thing when it comes back to working in that store after that hurricane's moved through. We want to make sure that the roads are clear, all the debris is gone, the power lines are off the roads, and associates can safely come back to that store to help us get it reopened and ready to go before we allow customers back in there.
We talked about how everybody's done such a great job in our country in unifying together and helping to flatten the curve as it relates to COVID-19. There's a role we can all play as well in terms of hurricane preparation and making sure that we ourselves are taking responsibility and being prepared, making sure that emergency responders aren't going to have to come and come into unsafe conditions to rescue us in a dangerous situation. So it'd be great if people take that same spirit that we've approached COVID-19 preparations with and think about it in light of the hurricane season this year.
We all know there's still some testing centers set up, and a city that is still dealing with testing centers is in Tampa. John Bennett, if you can still hear me here, are there any special plans to alert people that are working with those testing tents should you have any encounters with a tropical system?
Oh, absolutely. We're in great communication with our unified command system for COVID-19, starting with the County Emergency Operations Center, the city's Emergency Operations Center, and all of our hospital and healthcare partners. Our goal is to test 2,250 people a day for COVID-19, and we get those in a decentralized manner, but yet all of the data points come back in a unified report. So we have plenty of communication. We're very portable in our testing centers. I'm confident that we'll be able to continue our testing and merge into hurricane season and be very nimble and adaptive as we go through the rest of the year. And as we know, we have to plan for a resurgence or another wave of COVID-19 in the fall. So, we'll just be past the peak of hurricane season at that point. So we're going to have to do a good job, and not just us, all of the Gulf and Atlantic states are going to have to be of the same mindset, I would predict.
Actually, we do have a fairly good plan. We have a STEER registry, which is a transportation registry where people can call 211 and register, and if they need a ride out of the region for a tropical system, we initiate that plan. We make the phone call, find out if they still do need a ride, and we go out and actually make that transportation pickup, get them to a transportation hub, and take them to a shelter outside the region.
We have a special needs evacuation plan where you can register, whether it's medical driven or it's transportation disadvantage driven. So you can register under both of those scenarios. And we actually do use public transportation in our certain areas that need support getting to sheltering. All of that is timelined into our clearance rates and our clearance time planning. And we also obviously manage pet-friendly shelters and homeless shelters. So, we really stratify our evacuation plan as much as possible to make sure we can accommodate every sector of the community.
John just touched on homelessness. How exactly does that play a role in Harris County? Do you have a lot of homeless residents, and what's the plan for taking care of them should you run into a tropical storm or a hurricane?
We actually do open up shelters. We actually do sweeps through the region to make sure that anybody that needs shelter and wants shelter, they actually can be moved to those shelters. It's a fairly comprehensive plan. We got to really redo that plan in a COVID-19 environment because a lot of your homeless shelters, they're social distancing. The facial covers and hand washing and all those things weren't available to all citizens. So we've gone through and made a strategic plan and an effort to try to make sure that all that is available to everyone in the community.
And we hear about pets. Unfortunately, a lot of times when there's a tropical storm or a hurricane, people evacuate and they leave behind their pets, their four-legged friends.
Well, we definitely don't want to have the fact that someone has a loved one who's furry in their household to be a barrier to evacuation. And so we do plan with our local partners. As John mentioned, in many locations there are pet-friendly shelters, but also in most cases we have a partner who's running a location nearby that'll house those pets, or even on the same site where we're housing pets just outside the facility or nearby, so families can still care for their pets, be close to them, but we're able to keep the pets safe and the family safe. We're partnering closely at the federal level with FEMA and HHS, at the state level with emergency management in high-risk areas, but also at the county and community level, where the resources and volunteers really are, to make sure we have everybody lined up, provide safe shelter for those that need it, not just for the people, but also we have safe shelter in a nearby location or in a safe place for our pets.
Is the money that might be needed along with the human help going to be there after a big hurricane impact?
A lot of talk about, how we're able to manage the disaster, and is there going to be enough money left over after we do the trillions of dollars to try to keep the economy going. I think FEMA's done a reasonable job, reasonably good job, really, in COVID-19. They've done a really good job keeping us informed. They really helped us with our sheltering, our medical sheltering. I think they're going to make plans. We've been talking with them a lot this month about the hurricane season. I think they're going to make a yeoman's effort to try to get us get all the communities along the coastal communities that are impacted. They're going to get there early, and they're going to stay.
I think as a local municipality, we have fared very well with our fiscal responsibility. We have a good legacy of good leadership, managing our reserve funds, and we tend to keep those full. Of course, they're a bit challenged right now, but we're hoping to recover from that. So from a resource allocation locally, we think we're okay.
On the disaster side, the availability of volunteers is critical as we look to open sometimes hundreds of shelters across different communities and states. The availability of volunteers to do that is going to be something we're closely watching. We are trying to shift a lot of our other work to virtual to free up those volunteers who can deploy, to make sure we're not sending more than we need to into a community, but really reserving those spots for those critical shelter workers and other frontline service delivery, and providing safe virtual response opportunities for those who are unwilling or unable to deploy directly into a community after a hurricane. So we will be very intent on watching how our fundraising goes as we head into hurricane season. We'll be counting on the American public to make sure we're supported in a way we need to keep people safe in communities.
What I want to do next is get one final thought from all of our panelists that are joining us today. Just what message perhaps you want to get out there to the public with COVID-19 and the Atlantic hurricane season on our doorstep here. I want to start off with John Porter first with some closing remarks.
Americans along the coast and well inland face a wide variety of risks and potential impacts from hurricanes. And now is the time to get prepared, be thinking about what are the things that I need to have for my home or for my business so that I can stay safe and be sustained for some period of time if there is a hurricane impact. So we just want to urge everyone to take things very seriously, develop those plans, download the free AccuWeather app available through the app stores to be able to get that localized information and those warnings from the National Hurricane Center and from National Weather Service offices all around the country immediately push to you right on the app. So that's a great resource for you to have, whether you're at home or end up having to evacuate in any particular area. So now's the time to plan, and we'll get through the hurricane season together.
It's been a great conversation. I appreciate it. I also want to thank all of our associates in the field that have done a tremendous job taking care of our customers and members as they have been preparing not just for COVID, but will prepare for hurricane season as well. I think now is the time, as everybody's been saying, to have what you need, not just the items that you need, but the plan. Know what you're going to do. And if there's anything we can do to support, we're here for you. Thank you.
I think really I want to go back to just impacts. Just understand what your risks are and what the impacts to your community are, what the impacts are specific to you and your family. I know you might have disaster fatigue at this point, like a lot of us do already, but try to maintain just some sort of normalcy with the hurricane season, and try try to concentrate on those impacts and keep your family safe.
Thank you for allowing me to join today in our community in response to the upcoming hurricane season. And I agree with a lot of the colleagues on today is that, this is the time to be proactive. We say it every year, but I think we have a resilient community. I think they've done very well adapting and mitigating the pandemic over the last couple months. And they need to translate that into the hurricane season and realize that there are additional complexities, and those require thinking ahead and making sure that you get that accurate information and act on it in a timely and efficient manner. And that starts with a little bit of dress rehearsal. Go into your government websites, navigate those, know your zone, create those mitigation options around the home.
So first, thank you for having this call. I think it's a brilliant way to keep the public engaged and our partners engaged as we head into hurricane season, is to just not assume everything is going to work the way it did last time. The storms likely won't, and neither will the environment because of the pandemic we're all in. The second piece is across the country, we've just seen amazing human spirit in the face of this pandemic. We've seen communities rally together. We've seen the public organize and treat this threat very seriously and take action and change behavior. We've seen people help each other in tremendous ways, and we are going to need every ounce of that same spirit as we get into hurricane season, as communities are threatened and as communities are impacted by these very serious storms.
So going back to what Ken has often said, is the idea that when you do have a storm heading your way, keep in mind that the initial forecasts may not be right, especially if you're looking at information 5, 6, 7 days out. Some people anchor. They think, oh, I know what's going to happen now. Keep up with the change in the weather. Don't assume that just what you heard 5 days ago is going to be the same thing that's going to happen 2 days from now. So keep up with the weather. Again, it's a long season.
I wanted to thank the EMs. You all have had a long road with this COVID, and it's been a lot of work, and then going straight into hurricane season. So I just want to thank you for what you all do, and we're going to be here for you in this season with those briefings and that information. But I also wanted to thank Brittany, you, John, and Dan, for putting this on. We need to have more conversations like this. There's not a lot of place that we can talk about this. So, get information. Everybody watching, share this with everybody. Start thinking about how to be prepared. We've already heard it from everybody. Early preparedness. Think about it. Know your zone. You look around your house. Be ready early. Start now. And just like Dan said, it's a long season. We have to be ready for the whole thing. Get that information. Be prepared and be safe.
A good note to end on, and I'd like to thank our panel one more time and everyone who contributed to helping keep us prepared. We truly appreciate the hard work and efforts from all of those that are committed to public safety and information. Before we close, one thing that we've seen for sure during these challenging times is that people do come together. They do support each other, and there is a human spirit, and it's strong. Many have been resilient and already have been plowing through some tough times, and we have faith that everyone will get through this. But as our panel has said many times throughout this program, it is about being prepared and being prepared now. Let's prepare and stay safe. Hurricane season is now upon us. Thank you for joining us. I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Brittany Boyer.
Thank you for watching the AccuWeather Ready special presentation of the 2020 hurricane season during COVID-19. AccuWeather is offering free weather warning services to health agencies who have temporary COVID-19 testing and triage facilities. Agencies can register for the severe warning service at hospital.accuweather.com. For the most accurate weather forecast and the latest weather news and information before, during, and after the storm, visit AccuWeather.com and be sure to download the free AccuWeather app. This has been an AccuWeather special presentation.